have 93 million people out of work. They look for jobs, they give up, and all of a sudden, statistically, they're considered employed. Our economy is doing terribly. We've lost tremendous amounts of jobs to China, to Japan, to Mexico, and to so many other places. We have to help the middle class. The country, as you know better than anybody, the country was based on the middle class. They're the ones that really had so much to do with what we all have now, and they are being treated horribly.
All right, joining us now, ladies and gentlemen, Alan Keyes, former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, three-time GOP presidential candidate himself. Check him out at loyaltytoliberty.com. Hello, sir.
Hi, how are you?
Always good to talk to you. All right, let's start before we get into a piece that you wrote. Let's start with the latest poll out of Iowa today that shows Ben Carson has risen to the top to tie Donald Trump. I think 26 apiece. And next is Carly Fiorina. We had Mike Huckabee at the top of the show. And he, in response, tried to stress his outsiderness, if you will, saying he's never had a D.C. zip code. Outsider, 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 accounting for over 50% of the vote in Iowa right now. What does that say to you?
Nothing, because they're not outsiders. Donald Trump is one of the key figures in what I call the elitist faction that controls both parties now. And Ben Carson has proven himself to be somebody who has come from outside politics, but when you look at what he says and does, he's standing pretty much where the GOP quislings have been standing, except to give the same kind of lip service that Trump does to what they know to be the real feelings of people at the grassroots, but which they themselves have no commitment to whatsoever, in my opinion. I've talked about it on my blog for Carson. I mean, here's a guy who pretends to be pro-life and then endorses pro-abortion Monica Waby for Senate in Oregon, pleading that that's pragmatism. He's one of these people who wants to get things done. That's pragmatism, right? But he doesn't care what it is. And then there's Trump, who also wants people to think he's pro-life and strong on the issues of principle. And then he says that he'd appoint his sister, who's a big, strong pro-abortion judge, to the Supreme Court of the United States, and that would be wonderful. Since when? These are both people who basically are talking a good game, which they will not follow through on because they have no commitment in principle, no understanding in principle of the bedrock challenge that we're facing, of which everything else is a symptom, which is that the elites in this country have abandoned the founding, abandoned its principles, and abandoned the Constitution, and are now just seeking power for themselves.
And the piece that you wrote, Immigration and Donald Manure Spreader Trump. I don't know if you wrote that headline or not.
No, I didn't.
Okay, quite a provocative headline, certainly. Obviously, you're not a fan of Trump. First of all, who do you like in this race?
Well, frankly, two things are true. I like the American people, and I think it's time to put them back in charge. Both these parties represent an elitist faction that cares not at all for the will of the people of the United States. That's why everybody's unhappy. They've been electing and re-electing. Go one party, you go to the other party. They all get the same stuff because they're right-wing socialists or left-wing socialists. And I think the grassroots American doesn't want socialism. It doesn't want a government-dominated, government-controlled country that has been surrendered in principle to our enemies. We're sick of it. And Trump is exploiting the rhetoric that says, oh, we hate that. But then throughout his entire life, he has been an elitist faction insider, benefiting enormously financially and in other ways from the things that he himself talks about. He decries the death of the middle class, but that didn't keep him and his buddies from making money hand over fists in a financial and banking system that destroyed them.
I got to tell you, I loved watching you when you ran. I love listening to you speak, and I think that anybody who listens to you speak can't help but wish that your hat was in that ring as well. Might you ever throw it back in?
Not in the present party system. We've got to get rid of it. This party system is what's killing us. The Constitution had no place for such parties. We're supposed to be organized from the bottom up, the grassroots up. Instead, we have two parties that are seeking to nationalize politics, imposing these fabricated candidates on us in these general elections, rather than letting the people gather, starting at the local level, sending their representatives to higher levels to carry out their will, not the will of party bosses and elitist faction commanders.
All right, very quickly, the shooting of the police officer in Texas, the police chief there citing the Black Lives Matter movement and the rhetoric. What's your take on what's going on here?
Well, sadly, I think that, combined with the shooting of the TV people and that has occurred, are showing the fruits of what I call the release of licentiousness, where if you're a victim, you don't have to be subject to moral law. Your victim status means that you get to act on your anger, act on your sense of injustice, and you don't have to pay attention to laws or moral precepts anymore. That's a vicious lie from hell.
Yep.
It's the exact opposite of what this country was founded on. I don't care how badly you've been treated. You ain't been treated worse
Right.
than Jesus Christ, who was crucified, and he didn't surrender.
Alan, we're going to
the
have to leave it
principles of
there.
life.
I always love talking to you. Please come back soon. Alan Keyes, ladies and gentlemen. Up next, Chief Political Correspondent for Vox.com, Jonathan Allen. But first, with Donald Trump at the head of the polls, we want to hear from you. Of course, Ben Carson climbed up. Who is your choice for the GOP nomination? Go to Newsmax.com. I'm sorry, NewsmaxPolls.com. NewsmaxPolls.com. Let us know what you think.